I'm always looking at, different illustrators and their aviation artists who I admire, and, people in, art history. I mean, um, Edward Hopper, I love his work. And, of course, Maynard Dixon and any of the, Santa Fe, artists, and the Taos, Taos Society artists, so that's why we get into art, though, is you look at what's around you and it just inspires you.
My wife's going, we're live. We're live. I'm okay with that. I'm on video all the time. It doesn't seem like anything different. I could be the show where I'm on it all the time. Here comes Kathleen. All right. Would you like to say hi, Kathleen? No, Kathleen's running. Hi, Joanne. Hi, Joe and Karen. Hi, James. Hi, Roland. Hi, Carol. Hi, Marcia.
Yeah, Joanne Bear is actually my aunt.
Ah,
So I'm excited to see her on.
very good. So we're live, but I don't think, I guess it's kind of starts now. We can start a little bit for all those people that have, there's Ken connecting, Ken and Terry. So a lot of these individuals are fortunate because they own your paintings. How wonderful is that? So I have some too. I have one that's funny. We've sold 18 paintings, and one of my most favorite paintings hasn't sold, which is fantastic as far as I'm concerned, which is the Welcome to Utah.
Well, it was a little bit different for me, I think, to do that, just because I usually don't do a more of a graphic stuff, in the landscape. But it's a painting I've been meaning to do for years and years since I did the illustration for those billboards. I always intended to do it. And I just kind of felt like this show would be a good opportunity to, put an element such as a billboard in the landscape. And, it's kind of fun that it's a billboard that I did. So.
Yeah, and it's Highway 163. I know that area. I know exactly where that is. And actually, my son, Charles, took a picture of that the other day. He was up there and he didn't even know. He just stopped and thought it was cool and took a picture.
It has been interesting, when you Google, the Welcome to Utah signs, just type that in, and you see all of the people who have stopped to take their pictures in front of it. And, it's exciting to see.
So what we're talking about here, for those who've just joined us, is that this is Dave Meikle, obviously everybody knows that, but he's done all the signs for when you come into any of the places in Utah. So he also did the show for, what's the name of the show again? Last Man, it's not Last Man.
Last Man on Earth.
Last Man on Earth.
They adapted that billboard for I think for the premiere of the show. Yeah.
Oh, not just a premiere. It was every time they showed the show, it started with one of your images of your painting.
Okay.
Yeah. So
somebody actually just sent me a screenshot of the new Black Beauty that Disney did, and apparently they're coming into St. George, and it has the billboard that has Zion Canyon in it. So.
Oh, that's interesting. And I think we did the paintings. Howard posted the paintings for that a long time ago when they did a movie like that. So both of my artists, both artists are in it. That's interesting. So for those who are just joining us, we have Dave. He goes by David Meikle, but his friends are Dave. I'm somewhere in between a Dave and a David, depending on if I've sold a lot of paintings, I get to call him Dave. If I haven't, I get to call him David.
So anybody can call me Dave.
Everybody can call him Dave. And it's a wonderful show. So the fun thing about this opening, other than you don't get any wine or cheese or any little treats, is that you actually get to spend a little time talking to the artist, and we'll have a time where we can ask questions, and and I'm around to do it too. As many of you who have been to one of our openings know, often there's 200 to 500 people in the building, and it's almost overwhelming. And this is a wonderful show that Dave and I came up with over a year ago. And this is the first one-man show, not the last, I can assure you, but the first one-man show for David, for his work. We've been showing his work now for how long have we shown you now, David? Like 4 years, maybe?
I want to say 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Since sixth grade. Yeah.
Why don't you tell them exactly, you can tell them your end and I'll tell them my end on how you came into Medicine Man Gallery. You give them your version.
Okay. Well, I have a good friend here in Salt Lake named Donna Polton who writes a lot of, books on Utah art history. And she's been a real advocate of my work for years. And she sent me an email and said that she'd talked to you, mentioned my work, and said, he may be reaching out to you about your gallery. And so it took a little while. I just knew if I emailed you, I wasn't sure, if it's easy to ignore an email. So I put together a little portfolio of my work and kind of made it a little kind of a little booklet. I'd added some touches with the cover and some paper and some different things and tried to make it look like a real book and send it off to you. I know I showed it to the creative director where I work and said, do you have any thoughts? And one suggestion he had is because I was going to send it like registered or something. He said, don't do that. He might think he's getting sued. Send it by Federal Express, because usually you get good things by Federal Express. So I went to Federal Express and send it to you, and you called me up and were nice enough to have me in your gallery, and it's been great ever since. I've really enjoyed sending you work.
Well, and I'll tell that, and that's exactly right. That's how it happened. But the other backstory is that, so I'm in Utah for the museum show. It was some museum show, and I think some of my one of my photographs was in the show, and Billy Shank was in the show, and some of my artists, Shanta Begay was in the show. And I was in City Market. Is that what it's called? City Market. What's
It's
the name of
called
it?
City Creek.
City
City
Creek.
Creek, the City
That's
Creek Center.
it's this huge center. It's beautiful. It's this beautiful building. And inside it was the most amazing painting. It was this monstrous painting. How big is that painting?
It's about 23 feet wide by 10 feet tall.
Yeah, imagine that. And so imagine one of these paintings that you're seeing that we're showing on the monitor, and there's some things that he's had in the show that's 10 by 23 feet. And it was just mind-boggling. And I thought, and and I don't even know why. I think I literally saw it I was walking by the building, saw it through the glass and walked in just to look at the painting. I mean, and I saw Donna Polton that night. She was the curator of the museum. And I said, who is this Meikle guy? And she goes, yeah, he goes, he mainly has Utah representation. And he's great. He's an unfound, hero really in the art world. And I go, well, I'm really interested in his work. It's just amazing. I mean, so if he can paint that, my God, what else can he do? And I kind of left it at that. And and this is, I think, a good thing for artists, if there happens to be anybody out there that's an artist, is, you have to follow up and do things, right? And you did that because, I should have immediately probably followed up myself, but time just passes. But it wasn't very long after that, and I get this beautifully done, so professional manuscript kind of portfolio with like real photographs, right? I think you had real photographs, didn't you?
Well, they were printouts of
Yeah,
the
but you
work.
put them in there. I mean,
I
it was
glued them
like,
onto the pages.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was it. And I thought, wow, this guy's professional. He's reaching out appropriately, and all the paintings he's sending me are fantastic, and I know I can sell them. And that was it. So, and then it was like, I called you and you were up for it. And, I think one of your hardest things that you have to deal with is that because you have another job as the director at the Utah, what's the museum's name, exact museum's
Well, no,
name?
I'm art director for the University Marketing and Communications
There you go.
Office. So we're like an in-house ad agency for the University of Utah. And I've worked in this office for 28 years.
Yeah.
So I do wear kind of two hats. I'm a graphic designer, art director kind of by day, and then I landscape painter by night.
Yeah. And so for those who've bought Dave's work or get Dave's paintings, in a way, it's a great thing as a collector because he has this other job he does, and he has this because he's got 5 children that he needs health care for, and he doesn't want to lose it. And I don't blame him one bit. But what it does just as a collector point of view is that each painting is precious and they're fantastic. I mean, quite frankly, you could quit that job tomorrow and, you could sell every painting you made. But I understand you like your job, you're good at your job, you've done it for 20 years, and the health insurance is all good. But from a collector standpoint, it's fantastic because it means that the amount of paintings that actually get put out are not going to be as large, which in the long run, actually, as a collector, is a wonderful thing versus somebody that just is, producing so much work. So maybe you can tell our studio audience here about just kind of what your concept was for this show that you did. Once I said, by the way, when I said, would you do a one-man show? You never know what an artist, and I know that for you, it is going to be a big deal because you've got to put this together and do your job. And you said, yeah, sure, I can do it. And so I was thrilled. And so believe me, we'll have many more of these on an annual basis, but tell us a little bit about how your concept was for the show and what you did and how you did it.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about this show is it was very open-ended. I mean, I know there's certain type of landscapes that you prefer to sell in your gallery. And fortunately, I think that falls into, what would be my wheelhouse is I love, um, the landscape of the West. I love deserts of Utah and Arizona and Nevada. And so there was just, I think, I just felt like there was just ample opportunity to do the things that I love. And I know you gave me kind of a, between 15 and 20 paintings, and you kind of had specified do, maybe 5 large ones. And a lot of times when I do a show, I don't have that much time to get it together, or I've got other commitments going. And so I'll maybe have 1 or 2 big ones and then a bunch of smaller ones. Um, but I know it was last year about this time, I'd sent you a painting that was about 30 by 30. And I've started working in squares kind of in the last couple years. Bigger squares. I've done smaller ones in the past, but I sent that 30 by 30 to you and you sold it almost immediately. And you wrote and said, this is a great size for this show. If you could do a bunch that are like this, I think that would really work. And I kind of, when I was able to start on this work, I was really able to kind of, I felt like I kind of, got into a rhythm and hit my stride in the summer and just started. And I did a lot more of these bigger paintings. I mean, I'm not afraid to work large, but I think sometimes, you think, well, I only have time to do, a couple of really big ones and I'll do a whole bunch of small ones. But I think there's something about, doing a bunch of large paintings and having the large paintings together that was really energizing and fun. And so, and again, I like that, you really didn't specify what to do. I know sometimes when people, engage artists to do paintings, sometimes they'll have a lot of requests and things. And in a way, I mean, I do that for my job. I'm used to taking a lot of input, but it's sort of like the more restrictions you have on what you do, the harder it is, I think, to come up with something that's really you. And so that's why I think working on something like this is such a joy, because I'm picking the images that mean something to me, that the shapes or the colors or, the location is interesting to me, but I'm not having to fill another need. My need is to do something interesting and exciting. And so, that was what was the joy of working on this show.
Yeah, and I find that, I like to do that with artists is to just say, give me your best work. And preferably, I like the bigger stuff because an artist can only make so much big work. And I like to have that it ran through my gallery somewhere in in the record books sometime long when I'm gone. All these major paintings will have come through Medicine Man Gallery versus, just little things that were, the sales are nice, but it's not the most important thing. For me, I want the best examples that I can get that the artist is most excited about doing, and preferably some of the bigger works, because again, an artist can only do so many big works in a lifetime. And so when I give carte blanche, which I always do pretty much, I mean, there's some things maybe that I wouldn't be able to sell as well in my gallery if it were a Eastern, scene of a river or something that just, I don't have those people and I probably wouldn't find it as much as captivating. But I've never seen a painting that you've done that I didn't like, including paintings that you've done of Salt Lake City and plains, and you've done some other things. I guess, I don't know exactly what's being shown right now. Do you know what those are? Can you see those? Go back.
Yeah, I sent those to Patrick, for the podcast where I was talking about when I spent some time in England, and so this is going back 30 years. I had watercolors with me, so I was painting landscapes of places where I was living and in England. So
And so maybe we can kind of run through the show a little bit, Pat. We have Pat on here. Pat Travers is running that. And maybe you can kind of go through the show and we can talk a little bit about the paintings
yeah,
themselves, if everybody's up for that. And then we'll open it up to some questions after that. So,
yeah.
and maybe when you talk about these too, Dave, if you could just let people know how big they are, because they don't have a sense of size. I know exactly how big they are, but some of these
Yeah.
paintings, you look at them and they go, wow, this is a completely wonderful full painting, but it's only, 10, like this one's a very small painting, is only a small painting. And it's, so yeah, if you could just maybe talk about some of these pieces as we go through them.
Yeah, so this piece right here is Vermillion Cliffs. I can't remember if it's a 9 by 12 or an 8 by 10, but I know it was a smaller one. And Vermillion Cliffs are actually just one of my favorite places to drive through. I'm dying to get back down there and get some more photos. But we were the photo I used for this for reference is quite a few years old. A couple of friends from my office, we went down to Phoenix for the University of Utah was playing in the Fiesta Bowl in 2005, and we came back through this way in Vermillion Cliffs. So I shot a bunch of photos and I've done quite a few paintings of that, and just love the cliffs down there. So but yeah, it is interesting. I think when you talk about scale and if you're not familiar with the work, because I'll see Maynard Dixon paintings in books and things, and then you see the real one and it's either like much bigger than you expect or it's a lot smaller than you think. But certainly
Right.
with this one I look at, and I remember that was one of the smaller ones.
Yeah, they don't last. By the way, folks who are listening, who like his work and want to get them, and you want small ones, don't wait. They don't seem to last more than a few minutes when I put them on the website. Next painting, Pat. Oh, it's Pat will
So
go.
the small ones I sent you, I actually did those four after I delivered the big
Right.
paintings. um so this one, um
It's an 8 by 8, right?
yeah, and I do like working pretty small too. It is fun. I think it's a fun break after you're working really big to be able to do something in, an evening or two. This one though, I just, when I'm driving to Tucson from Phoenix, there's just a really great, I'm sure that the butte has a name, but you drive past it, and I had my son take a bunch of photos, and of course, this is a kind of a designed landscape. So I think if you looked at the photo, you wouldn't see the painting in it. And so I've added, some of the cactus and scaled things up. I've designed the scene for this, but it was a lot of fun to do. It reminds me of the driving to your gallery, and that's why it's called Approaching Tucson.
Ah, yeah, beautiful little painting.
So thank you.
Next, Pat. I don't know if there's a little bit delay on Pat's end when he has to do this.
Yeah, so this is another one of those paintings that I think is where I'm kind of putting on my graphic designer hat to do. The area here is called Kolob Canyon. Now it's part of Zion Canyon National Park, and it's sort of I think an unknown part of the park because it's not connected to the main part. But you get to it really easily from I-15. You have to go north from St. George, and you go into this area, and you just have this great view of these cliffs. And so I'd stopped to take pictures of the cliffs, but there was also really interesting juniper tree that I took the photo of. And I've kind of had these photos around for years, and it's sort of like, if you look at the photo you don't see the painting in it, but sometimes when you're forced to kind of reevaluate things, I was able to kind of scale the tree up and then make the cliffs smaller. I wanted to play the idea of having the tree be the main focus of the painting, and then the cliffs are smaller into the background. And so again, it's a design, it's almost like a design problem. I'm playing with ratios of what's the main interest of the painting, as opposed to the background. And again, that's where I kind of came up with the name of the show, Desert Elements. I was sort of playing with each of these elements that I think that you find in the landscape. So like a juniper tree or cliffs or a sky or clouds or things like that. Each painting I found kind of had one of those focuses. So this particular painting is on the juniper tree, which we tend to have quite a bit of in southern Utah.
That's gorgeous. Next painting. Yeah, that's beautiful.
So again, this is one of the smaller ones that I was able to do. This is an area that's east of St. George. So you're kind of looking east towards Zion Canyon, but it's not a national park or anything, but it's the trail is called the Lavercan Overlook Trail. And just one of my favorite areas. You just get this gorgeous view of the desert. I know Maynard Dixon he painted it quite a bit when he was there. That's how I recognized some of the buttes from his paintings. And and the nice thing is there's not a lot of people around. So you can, there's not a lot of houses or roads or things. I just feel like it's sort of a perfect desert view.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Next painting. Oh, this is a beautiful one. This is one it's amazing. This is in the show itself. It's right under the heading of your words. And we'll show the people the show at the end of this so we can kind of run through it if everybody's up for it. But Heights of Zion. So I always find this interesting. So this is like one of the best paintings in the show. We've sold 18 paintings out of the 20, and this one hasn't sold yet. And it always amazes me when that happens. And maybe you want to just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's certainly, it's a large painting. So it's a big commitment for somebody for their wall space or whatever. So, that is sort of the thing about painting large is you do have to be able to find people that have the space. A lot of art collectors already have a lot of work on their wall. And so I think that's why it pays for an artist to paint in lots of different sizes. But I certainly do like working large. And for me, this reminds me of when I was engaged to my wife and I traveled down to southern Utah with her family. We were hiking. This is on the trail up to Angel's Landing. And I don't know if you've ever been out on Angel's Landing, but I think it's one of the scariest hikes in America. You're holding on to some chains and you're looking like straight down, a couple thousand feet. But before you get up to the view of Angel's Landing, Maynard Dixon he did a square painting of that. But you kind of go through this really narrow section. And so, you look back and this, what you're looking at is called the grotto, or the grotto area of Zion Canyon. And so, again, though, I just love where you're kind of dealing with distance and height and what we'd call atmospheric perspective. So, the further back something is, the lighter, grayer it gets. And but one of the challenges too with something like this is, how much light do you show inside the shadow? I wanted to have the foreground it's certainly, dark, but it's, when you're standing in a shadow, you're not in blackness. You can still see details. So you have to play up, how much detail you do put in.
Yeah, that's an amazing painting. Anybody that's in Tucson to get a chance to come see this whole group, I recommend it, especially this particular piece. Next piece. Yeah, that's a pretty painting. It's a really pretty painting in person, especially.
Well, and this is when you're driving down to St. George, before you get there, you start, hitting the Joshua trees. And I think I mentioned in my, when we were talking about the paintings, of course, being a child of the 80s, I love the U2 album, The Joshua Tree. So I always like seeing these Joshua trees by the side of the freeway. But St. George has these really beautiful red cliffs right by the freeway. But then behind it, it's called the Pine Valley Mountains. And they're really tall and they do get a lot of snow in the winter. And so I always like playing that contrast between white snow and red rock. And so this is, again, one of the, I tend to capture a lot of my images from cars when I'm traveling. So I was able to, get a shot of the mountains. My daughter, Amelia, who you met or you talked to just a few minutes ago,
Right.
she was at a swim meet and in Cedar City, which is about 50 miles north of St. George, and I was staying in my parents' condo. So she was staying up with her team, and I was staying down in St. George. So when I was driving up to see the meet the next day, I was able to get this photo of the mountains and the Joshua Tree. But again, it's where I'm kind of putting on my graphic designer hat. If you look at the photo, the Joshua Tree was quite small in the photo, in the frame, but to do a painting and what you'd say is artistic license, the artist has the control to change the frame, the scene, and to me this became another sort of design problem. I wanted the focus to be on the Joshua Tree, so the tree became big and the cliffs and the mountains became much smaller. Now I've done paintings in the past where the Joshua Tree is much smaller and the cliffs are big. Those are what the focus. I love painting cliffs. That's probably my favorite thing to do. But I kind of reversed it around for this one. I wanted this painting to be out about the Joshua Tree.
And when you put in the little clouds on the right side, is that strictly a compositional choice to just kind of draw the eye that way?
Well, I think what tends to happen is I tend to use what's there. So there were some low-lying clouds that morning. I was driving out of St. George, and so they were there. So
Yeah.
I kind of put in what was there. Um, I think when I started as an artist, though, I tended to be a little more slavish with what was, I put what was in the photo if it was there. Um, with this one, I am kind of making decisions of what to leave in and take out. But I do find that I know there are other artists that are really good at, kind of, starting at a point and then being able to make things up. And I've found that I get in a lot of trouble, like if I'm trying to make up a mountain or if I'm trying to make up a tree or if I'm trying to make up a cloud. So I tend to take a lot of my clues to what's really there.
Okay.
So, I'm looking at the structure of things and, and to me, I think it just probably felt like it would have been a little bit blank without some clouds. I probably could have left them out, but, I do like, they were there and I liked them. So I left them.
Okay. Next one. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So again, this is one of the paintings I did after dropping off the show at your place. And so we'd been through Las Vegas, and I think we'd gone through Mesquite. So we're headed to St. George, and the sun was just going down, and I just loved the light. And so, I was able to, and again, I took the Joshua Tree was kind of at a different location, but I placed it in, and I wanted to just kind of capture that feeling of, the tree picking up the light right as the sun is going down.
Cool. Next. Yeah, that's a fantastic painting.
Yeah, so this is back in Kolob Canyon. So if anybody finds themselves driving on I-15, north of St. George, and they see the sign for Kolob Canyon, it's well worth a stop. There's just a whole section of these red rock cliffs, and so this particular painting I was leading a group of plein air painters. It was for a program at the University of Utah. So it wasn't actually through the art department, but it was kind of an adult class where I was teaching, painting in the environment. And we just spent the day up there painting. And the thing that I liked about this is just there were just these rolling clouds that just went through all day. And the thing that reminds me when I look at this painting the most was just sort of slowing everything down. There were so many people that had come through, though. You stop the car, you get out, take a picture, get in, and drive away. And I think a lot of times, because everything's going so fast, we don't have the time to spend just looking at the landscape for several hours. And so that's what for me, that's one of the nice things about painting on location is you get to kind of stop and slow time down and really, I think you feel connected to the landscape when you're, at the same place for, 5 or 6 hours. So
Mm, yeah, and it's a gorgeous thing. Clouds are fantastic too. That's one of the things too. I think you really do well. Or you might as well just call them Mickle clouds because they do definitely have a certain sensibilities. And there's a good example. That's not a very big painting, maybe 10 by 14 or something, right?
yeah,
Maybe.
another one of the
Yeah.
small works. I have done, I think, a bigger version years and years ago, but of a similar set. I think I mentioned in the podcast, there was a drive across Nevada coming back to Salt Lake from Northern California, and there was just a day with these kind of rolling clouds and shadows on the mountains of Nevada, and for me that was just really exciting. Anytime you can sort of pick up that light and shade, that creates that depth and shapes. Because that's one thing I think a lot of the artists you represent, they're so good at, kind of breaking the landscape down into, shapes,
Mhm.
a little more simplified shapes. And to me, that goes with my graphic design training. I'm looking for shapes, strong patterns, and for me, I like to find it in the environment. Other people, I think, with abstract work, find it with non-objective artwork. For me, I like finding it in nature.
Mhm. Yeah, that you do have that. Yeah, there is a sensibility of uh, you can break them down to shapes in your paintings. It really is. I hadn't really thought of it in those terms, but there's no doubt you can. Next one, Pat. That's a beautiful cactus. I love the fact in this saguaro you picked one that, everyone wants to pick the classic looking saguaro that, is super symmetrical and everything, and they're not, right? This is really what they look like.
Well, I do want to avoid, I think there's sort of an iconic view of the saguaro. Um, I kind of want to avoid that. I want to find the one that just is kind of misshapen and but interesting to look at. I kind of tend to do the same thing with pine trees. I don't really like painting pine trees because I'm worried they look like Christmas trees. And so I usually try, if I'm doing a pine tree, I want to find something that has, some dead branches or, a different kind of shape. And I think with the cactus, so there are so many different variations and shapes and things, it's just, kind of endless variations you can do.
It's one of the things I've always used for as an art dealer is if and I'm looking at an artist, a new artist's work, if they have saguaro paintings, if they can do a good saguaro like this, I know they have the chops to be able to be a real painter, to be somebody I'd be interested in it. And if they're just stick figure kind of things or really classic, just I don't find that as interesting. And this one with all the little burrows and the, in the saguaro, it's it's a classic kind of having lived around them now for 40 years, it's exactly what they look like. Next,
Well,
please.
see, and we don't have them in
Yeah,
Utah, so I'm not around them very much. And
but you
so,
captured it. That's the key. You can do it. I thought it was very successful.
well, thanks. So this is Tower Butte down in Lake Powell, kind of the Page area. Um, I was, going to do a really, really small, kind of what I was sending you. The idea was I was going to bring for the opening, I was going to show up with 4 really small paintings, excuse me, that I was going to have to fit in the car. I was assuming I was going to be bringing, several kids and stuff. So we weren't going to have as much room. So I was working on doing these small paintings. And I think the challenge with a really small painting though, is you have to make sure the composition is really strong. And so
Hmm.
I was looking for something that had just really strong, simple shapes. Because I think sometimes with a small painting, especially if like it's hard to do a Grand Canyon in a 5x7 size, because it's just a vast, you know, landscape. So I was looking for something more simplified and more of a kind of a direct statement.
But you have done a small Grand Canyon. I know because I have one. That's
Yeah,
very small. It's probably not more than 8 by 8. I think it's the study for the one we're going to see here a little bit later.
it was
Next.
a variation of them, but if you looked at what I actually took, though, that was only a small section of the
Yeah.
photo. There was a lot that I
Oh
left
yeah.
out.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that.
so this is a little bit bigger version of the Vermillion Cliffs. Again, it's from the same trip I was on, but I wanted to do something that was very horizontal. I think I mentioned earlier, I've been doing a lot of squares lately, but then, that end though, I've also been doing a lot of things that are like a 1:2 ratio or a 1:3 ratio. I've kind of been thinking in terms of ratios too.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it kind of forces you to think a little more about the design of the piece. Of course, I think there's more traditional shapes of paintings that I've done. There's sort of the 8:10 or the 16:20s are kind of good shapes. But I think if you have a little more of an unusual shape, you're forced to kind of, I think, get a little more creative about how much sky you're going to show, how much foreground you're going to show. And with this one, I really just wanted to focus on the texture of the cliffs. And so there's just very little bit of sky and a little bit of foreground. Really, this is about the rock. This is about the rock and the
And I
cliff.
love that shape actually for paintings. Whoever does, Stephen Datz does those sometimes, and Ed Mel does too. I
Mhm.
love that shape. That's one of my most pleasing sizes of a painting. Somebody who's a really good landscape painter can use that to great usage if they know what they're doing. And yeah, I thought that was a really successful painting, quite frankly.
I mean, I have talked about wanting to simplify and focus in on areas, but then there is the side of me where it's like I do want to put in as much as possible. And so I think having a longer thing like that, I am able to kind of put more in on the sides. So
Yep. And the next painting, which Pat was just showing, is to me almost like the quintessential what I would consider David Meikle painting. So if you could click to the next one, Pat, that one. To me, that's when I actually think of your work, I kind of think of this kind of imagery.
well, I've always looked at the sky and clouds, and this is coming along I-70. I took the photo. We were, kind of in the Four Corners area, but head back to Salt Lake, and there's a section of mountains in Utah called the Book Cliffs that are
Yeah.
really, really beautiful. Every time they don't have they're not as red rocky as like say St. George or Moab, but they're a little more white, but just really beautiful shapes. But again, though, I wanted to, this painting is about the cloud. This is about the big thunderhead, and kind of, sort of more evening light. And I don't know what it is. It's just, I always grew up looking at, especially in late summer in Salt Lake, we get these big we don't get a lot of storms, but we get these big kind of towering thunderheads to the east. And so I was always just really intrigued by those kind of cloud shapes. So this kind of is a homage to that idea of these big clouds, where it's most of the painting. And this is one painting where I mentioned the podcast. I'm a big fan of the rock group Rush, and then
Mhm.
they have a song about the clouds battling, and so that's why I actually came up with the title of this painting before I did the painting, which is opposite for me because normally I get done with a painting and then it's like, oh, I got to think of a title. I'm more of a visual person. I'm not as much of a word person. Writing is harder for me, so I'm usually trying to find a title, but I don't necessarily want to. I'm not really good at clever titles either, I don't think, and so this one was nice that I didn't have to dream up a title. And then this was it was kind of a companion piece. I had these. I was able to kind of acquire both of these frames, and I wanted to have two pieces that really work together. And this one is called. The other one was Cloud Battle, and then I thought, well, this one could be Cloud March because sort of I felt like it was sort of like there was sort of a rhythm with the clouds kind of marching into the background, and there was kind of a rhythm when you're coming up from Moab, when you hit these cliffs, there is kind of a rhythm with the cliffs that they kind of march backwards too. So, but I thought, since the theme was sort of clouds, Cloud March would work for this.
Yeah, and these are bigger paintings. This is what, like a 30, 40 or
These are 24 by 36.
yeah, there you go, 24 by
So
36.
they're bigger, but I've worked a lot bigger. But these are a fun size to do where they're big enough that you feel like you're making a statement, but they're not so big that you're working months and months on them.
Yeah. Another beautiful painting.
So this is Zion Canyon area. There's an area called the Court of the Patriarchs, and this is called Isaac Peak. So Isaac being one of the patriarchs in the Old Testament. Um, but I've always, just again though, this, when you're talking about desert elements, to me the element with this that we're dealing with is just the sheer cliffs. That when you go into Zion Canyon, you're just always looking at the height of everything. You're just surrounded by these cliffs.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is Dead Horse Point,
Yeah,
which is more closer to Moab. This is kind of eastern Utah. There's a
right.
section that's, I think, very iconic that people know if you're looking more towards the west, and this is looking south. Um, Now, it probably doesn't have the same grandeur that the Grand Canyon has, but it's still, for me as a scene, is interesting because you're looking back over, these different sets of mesas that go back. And I've mentioned before, I'm always looking for opportunities, again, with shapes. The further back you go, the lighter and the grayer the shapes will get. And so when you can control those color values, you can really get a sense of distance. And I kind of found that for me, paintings are more interesting to work on when I can show that distance. And then to the feeling that, this river is just kind of cutting through the land.
Yeah, I thought this one was exceptionally successful. And it's a fairly large painting too. It's not a small painting. Do you remember how big this was?
I think this one is 24 by 48.
Yeah, it's a really
But
successful painting.
again, it's a 1:2 ratio. But I am able to kind of put all the interesting things on the sides that I want to. Sometimes with a square, the challenge with a square is you don't, sometimes I think you're cramming a scene into it. You want to find sort of an interesting area that sort of fits just sort of right in the center. With a longer one, I think you feel like you can be more panoramic. You can show I look for things that have more vertical lines and shapes.
Next painting.
So yeah, this is Monument Valley, and right in that same area that the billboard is in. But and I had so much fun kind of painting the landscape that was in the billboard painting, um, that I wanted to do just a painting of that set of buttes. And that's pretty much with the sky. That's how it was when we were there that day. It was in March, and
Mm.
just sort of these just rolling clouds. And so again, it's just sort of a just interesting desert landscape to me. I do like wide open spaces, and red rock, and Monument Valley just kind of really has that.
Yeah, it has everything. They're all your landscapes. Every one of them is just a David Meikle painting. Next.
So this is Cottonwood Trees. I think I titled it October Cottonwood. This is a 24 by 30. Again, we're talking about, kind of everything with this show. It ended up being a lot of pieces being about 30 inches in at least one dimension. So it was fun because it was big, but it wasn't giant. This was a section of where Maynard Dixon lived. This is Mount Carmel area. There were I can't remember the name of the cliffs, but they're kind of these I think they're limestone, just really dramatic area. And if you go through in October, it's just fantastic. Um, I was looking at these are kind of old photographs I had taken in 2002, where the tree itself wasn't really that interesting. And then the cliffs behind it in the photo weren't really that interesting, but the light was kind of coming from the same area. And again, I sort of made it a design problem. So I wanted to, rather than do a painting about the cliffs, which I've done a lot of paintings of that Mount Carmel area, I wanted to do a painting about the cottonwood trees. And somebody mentioned to me about sort of the dead area and the trees too. And for me, that's what makes a tree interesting. I think
Yeah,
there's
that's
when you
right.
have sections that are alive, and then there's sections that are, kind of dead, and you can see all the branches. You get kind of a more interesting shape. I do have a hard time in summer when everything is green and everything's the same. I think for me, probably the biggest challenge for me to paint is trees. And especially if you have a whole line of trees and they're all green and they're all the same, I have a hard time finding the shapes in those. That's why I think I do prefer autumn paintings where you do get different colors in the
Mm,
trees, and the shape of the trees are a little more easy to identify.
this is a gorgeous painting.
So this is a bigger version, I think, of what you ended up buying,
Yeah,
Mark.
it is. Yeah.
But this one was, and I got this photo from the trip I was down at your gallery. I think it was in March, for a show a couple of years ago. So we were traveling back. I'd never been to the South Rim, and but what really grabbed me about this area was, of course, you could do a scene where it would work really well on a 1:2 ratio, but when you're at the Grand Canyon, especially where we were at in the South Rim, it was like looking down. I felt like, you could look down for so far. So that's why I've kind of done this series of these paintings about the Grand Canyon, where it wasn't like where you had the sky. I wanted to show like the depth, kind of when you're looking down in the Grand Canyon from that height. There's so many different, feels like, places you can go, and things that, to me, it's just so interesting, and the distance involved in that depth. So I can't remember if the one that you have has some sky in it, but I wanted to try something that didn't have sky but still had that feeling of depth going
Well,
back.
looks like this one. Looks like this one in a smaller version.
Okay.
I just thought it was super successful, the way that you approached it without the sky and just the forms and the light and the composition. It just struck me as being a unique point of view, and it was, exquisitely executed. And this is the better of the two. It's the bigger one, but I'm glad I at least have the small one. It came in, I don't even remember when it came in, 8 months ago. And I said, I got to keep this one. That one's not going. And that's the fun. I try to always leave great paintings, the best ones, the biggest ones, to my clients, but every once in a while I do have to snag something. So.
Well, small ones are fun to kind of make little statements with, but it is fun to kind of flesh out the detail and everything with when you're working big.
Well, the hardest part about getting your paintings, actually, for my own collection, is that they always sell. They sell immediately. I mean, I've sold some that literally I'm unpacking them on the ground, and somebody who doesn't even know who you are buys them. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it's just, well, I would have bought that one too. So, but I do try to always let my clients have the first grab of it. But so I have a few smaller ones than yours. Quite frankly, I'm going to buy I think the one of Utah with the sign, if no one is smart enough to grab that one, because I think it's just terrific. I think we've kind of gone through the show part. Now, what we're going to do is hopefully Pat will be able to do this, so we can open it up to questions that people have. And then maybe toward the very end of the questions, Pat can run this and we can actually show what the show looks like hanging, because it's a beautiful show. It's a gorgeous show. And then, unfortunately, shows like that just don't last that long. They all have to go to their new homes. And since everything is basically sold out, but two paintings, it'll go away quickly. So, Pat, if you're there, maybe we can, if people want to raise their hand, we can ask some questions. We'll see how this goes. This is the first one we've done like this, so we may have a little bit of a.
If you have a question, please raise your hand in the chat. If you don't know how to do that, go to the chat on the bottom of your browser, and there should be an option to raise your hand. Yep. The first question I have is from Mark Chase. So I'm going to unmute you, Mark, if you'd like to ask, and then I will remute you afterwards.
I have a question, Pat. Do you always talk like that? You sound like a robot.
I'm only talking like this to make you look good, Mark.
Man, you get a fantastic
professional voice.
Okay, we have Mark.
Hey, Dave. Hey, thanks for doing this, guys. This is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Experience. So, a couple. How do you start a painting? You know, got a blank canvas. How do you start? Do you section it off, or do you go from like the bottom to the top, or the top to the bottom? And how do you know when it's finished?
Okay, so well, sometimes they're a little bit different, but I usually start with a little sketch or a thumbnail or just the idea. And like I mentioned earlier, I have a hard time just making up something out of nothing. So usually the painting will come out of like an experience of a place I've been where, you know, I'll have taken the photograph or done a little, you know, plain. I don't do a lot of plein air painting because I am more of a studio artist. I've, you know, have a commercial background. So I do tend to, I like taking a lot of photos and then bringing that information back to the studio. So then I'll look at what I've got. And then I do think about the shape of what I'm doing, the shape and the size of the painting. And I'll usually do a little thumbnail sketch. And then if I know the idea will work. And then a lot of times I'll take a printout of my photograph. I found lately that you know, if I do like just a divide it, you know, half and half on my printout, and then I do the same on the painting, then I just draw you know, just draw the shapes on there. But I do kind of stick to my reference fairly closely. I am thinking about, you know, I want to leave out a certain amount of detail, but I also do want to keep a fair amount of detail or the suggestion of detail in my work. So it is kind of some design, and then it is some of what's there. I do find that I can get to, I think, the underlying structure of what I'm doing better if I do stick to the information that I've brought back into the studio.
And you know how do you know, this is how they know when the painting is finished, when the rent's due. So
Well, about the, how do you know when a painting is done? I do get asked that a fair amount. And I think I found is when the brush strokes and the things that I'm adding to the painting start to take away from the painting, then it's time to quit. It is a little bit, because I think I do tend to, you know, I had an art director boss who used to call it noodling. I used to noodle a lot of my work. I was known for being a tight painter. But I think you reach a point where you can kind of over render. And when you find yourself getting to that point where you're putting too much in, especially in background areas, I do find that, you know, you leave the backgrounds, you know, kind of detail free. You want the detail to be up more close. You want your, or whatever your focal point is, you want the detail kind of in there. You want to leave the backgrounds a little, you know, not having so much attention to them. But yeah, once you find yourself where you're taking away from the painting, then it's time to stop.
I call it everything but the kitchen sink. And I see that sometimes, especially artists that aren't sure of themselves. They keep putting in more and more, you know, oh, I'll add a rainbow and 5 birds going through, and, you know, and as you just said, I think that's right. You know, less is more sometimes, and it takes away, and that takes, it seems like it for artists, again, I'm not a painter, but I've seen a lot and talked to a lot of them, that it takes a period of time before you can feel confident enough to go, I need less.
Yeah. Well, I have certainly had a lot of art teachers over the years trying, you know, they try and beat that out of you where you're, you know, they don't want you to render so much. I do think whatever it is in my personality where I need it to feel realistic. So I don't think I'll ever get to the point where, you know, I'm just painting flat colors. You know, I always have to have that texture, that detail in there. And that's where, you know, people might not be familiar with my graphic style. And that is where I'm dealing with flat colors, because I am dealing with shapes that I draw that are in the computer, that I draw in the computer, but you can't render that. So I kind of have that forced upon me, and then I can deal with it if I have that limitation. But if I'm painting, I do need to have that kind of, you know, kind of scumbling or, you know, working the surface or getting that just sort of the surface, the paint to just sit just right. I don't think I'll ever, you know, not be able to do that.
Yeah, and nor should you, because that actually is your voice, right? When I know a David Meikle painting when I see it, and there is a component of it that is, you know, highly rendered. And as you said, it seems to be more foreground, and that's who you are. I want that. I want to see that. So Next question.
Our next question will be from Marcia Wetmore.
First time I've never heard you talk, Marcia. You have to unmute on the bottom. It'll be to your far left on your screen. Let's see if I can do it for you. Hang on. Let's see if we can do this for you, Marcia. Ask to unmute.
There you go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay,
Hi.
so hi. So my husband and I bought the lovely South Rim piece that we're very excited about.
Well, thank you.
My question plays in with this line of what we're talking about. Editing paintings. We attended we went to the Grand Canyon Celebration of Art one year, and there was a lecture on Gunnar wood force, and they showed photographs of actually what he painted at that time next to the painting that he actually painted. And they referred to, back then he was photoshopping, in that he would eliminate certain things for the sake of the composition of the entire piece. So I was just wondering, in your process, when you approach a subject or whatever, if it pretty much comes out exactly as you see it, or do you do some of that photoshopping where you might bring something in for the sake of the composition or eliminate something?
I do that sometimes, but I do try and get the, like, I think the painting you have is pretty much exactly how it was. Where I think with that one, it was about the cropping of what I had. I do want to be careful with, I do want to not, I think, have it feel like it's not the same place. I'm very much interested in capturing what is there. So there sometimes is like a road or something that will sometimes be in pictures, and I'll move the horizon line out, or I'll move a strand of trees up to kind of take that out. Or like I say, like I was explaining in some of the other paintings, where I do want the painting to be a little more designed, so I will kind of maybe scale up the tree and make the, whereas if you were standing there in that location, the mountains might be, bigger than the tree. I want to bring the mountains smaller, so the ratio of what I'm interested in showing is different. But usually I'm just kind of getting all my information though from what is there on scene.
Next question.
Well, it's great meeting you. I actually am going to have to sign off pretty quick, but I
Well,
really
thank you so much for
enjoyed.
joining.
Yeah, I enjoyed meeting you and being able to be a part of this from Oklahoma.
Uh-huh. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, I think, Marcia, right? You guys are getting there in a couple of weeks.
We'll be here next week
Yeah.
in Tucson next week. So,
I'll bring in my little painting from my house and you can see it.
oh yeah, that'd be
Not for
great.
sale, sorry.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next question.
If anyone has a question, please indicate in the chat and I will unmute you. Going once. Oh, Mark Chase has another question. All right. One moment, Mark.
I got it. He said, David, have you painted any night scenes?
When I really first started painting seriously, one of the first paintings that I did, this is going back to 1994 after I graduated from the University of Utah with my BFA. There was a scene outside of my grandparents' farm that really struck me at night. And I worked on that for a long time, just trying to figure out, how to deal with the colors and the values. And, I struggled with it. I don't know if it's really that good of a painting, but Yeah, after that, I haven't done anything that's like pure night, but one thing I've found myself doing a lot of is like in Salt Lake, and I'm sure anywhere where there's a lot of lights, but I think we have these really beautiful sunsets in Salt Lake City, you know, especially after the sun has gone down and the lights are coming on. I like kind of capturing, you know, that kind of that time where the sun's down and the lights of the city are coming on. And so I've done quite a few paintings of that, where I'm playing with kind of how can you show artificial light in a painting or city lights in a painting. That's one of the projects I did this year before I started on the show for you, Mark, is I had a big commission that ended up in the University of Utah campus. It was, I think, about 18 feet. I did a scene of kind of the Salt Lake Valley.
Yeah, I saw it. I
Like,
actually saw it on your
lights
Facebook.
coming on.
It was gorgeous. It was unbelievable. It was a beautiful piece.
So that's probably about the closest that I'm
Mhm.
coming right now to night, you know, doing a nocturne. I think for me, it's about sunlight and shadows and, you know, things like that. So I do find myself probably not doing as many night, or, you know, seeing night scenes as a possibility for a painting.
One thing else also I would just say is, if people want to hear more about David's life and his backstory and how, you know, how he got into art and all that, on the Art Dealer Diaries, we did do about an hour and a half podcast. So, and that's up. You can find it on any podcast platform, or YouTube if you want to watch it. And it's very interesting. It gives you that really behind the scenes, that real depth that you can't get in just doing this. If there's no more questions, we'll see if there's one more question we can take, and if not, then we'll show the show. Anyone else there, Pat?
Yeah, I got one more. So, you know, you look at your screen and you see us David fans. Are there any artists that you follow or collect?
Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot of artists who I really admire, you know, both nationally and locally. And my wife and I have found, you know, it actually is fun to collect art. We end up, you know, buying quite small paintings, but you know, we'll go to some of the local art shows here, and there'll be some emerging artists and people that we like, and we do have, you know, kind of an art collection that we've got going. So I think kind of find myself on the other end, where you're, you know, you see stuff you like and it's fun to buy. I know for my wife's, for Christmas a few years ago, because my wife loves Diet Coke, and there's a really good artist named Erin Barrett, and she does these really beautiful still lifes, has a really distinctive style, very shape oriented. It's, you know, I'm actually very jealous of what she does. And she had this Diet Coke can, and it was crumpled, so you had, you know, the light, you know, the little shapes and everything. And so I bought one for my wife for Christmas, and she loved it. We have it up in our kitchen, and I love looking at it every day. And so in a way, I think that's kind of the collector's experience. It's fun to have, I think, something that somebody else has made. So we do have other artists up around the house. I think, you know, it's unique with Mark and the people that he represents. You know, a lot of them have been heroes of mine for a long time. And I think you do find yourself being kind of starstruck when you meet them. I know that when I met Gary Ernest Smith for the first time, you know, I found myself tripping over my tongue, because, you know, he's so good. He's a really nice guy. He's, you know, very genuine. But, you know, same with Ed Mell. In the 90s, there was a book that came out about his work that I just, you know, blew me away. I loved what he did. And, you know, a few years back, he was at a show, and I was able to, you know, meet him and talk to him. And, you know, so there's definitely people that I look up to and admire. And that's why we get into art, I think, is because you look at what somebody else has done. And I don't think it's necessarily a jealousy thing, but it inspires you to do better, you know, to maybe reach the level that they're at. You know, Howard Post is another artist who I remember seeing his work in, you know, various places in the 90s, and just loved what he did, you know, the way he broke things down into, you know, shapes. And we have a book that he illustrated that my kids have loved. So
And Howard called me, he emailed me and said, I want David Meikle's email address. I don't know if he reached out to you or not yet.
He did reach out to me. That was really,
His
I
work
was
is
thrilled
unbelievable
to see
because
that.
this guy's fantastic. I just was so amazed. I wanted to reach out to him. So it's come full circle all the way to you, Dave.
But there's artists like that I admire. And then there's I'm always looking at different illustrators and their aviation artists who I admire, and people in art history. I mean, Edward Hopper, I love his work, and of course Maynard Dixon and any of the Santa Fe artists and the Taos Society artists. So that's why we get into art, though, is you look at what's around you and it just inspires you.
So I really appreciate everybody asking these questions and attending. And what I'd like to do now, if we can, if you can, is show the show. It takes up a good part of our gallery space and our exhibit space. So if you can hear me, Pat. Maybe.
Absolutely. Give me just one moment.
So we'll go and show what we've done. It's a very odd thing to have this wonderful body of work that somebody worked on for a year. And, we have the professional signage above it and all the things, and it just looks amazing. Yet, very few people are actually going to get to see it unless they're on Zoom. And, especially for you, since this is your first one-man show for us, it's kind of an odd thing for you, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your commitment, Mark, to still hanging it and making it look good. And you've done a fantastic job with the sales. It's kind of odd, I think when this pandemic hit, I think we kind of thought it would hopefully be over by the time, we got to this point. And, then it just, I realized it wasn't going to happen. But thanks to technology, it has been nice to be able to see what you've done. And
I can't activate the camera on here.
If worst comes to worst, I'll take my computer, I'll walk through the gallery and I'll go show it.
Mark, that might actually be the best decision out of all of them.
Easy enough to do. So I'll just, this is technology and half of it never works when you want it to. So what I'm doing is going to go out of my very dirty office, which I get to hide in. I really like that component of it. But I do have a nice fancy camera. And so I'll just walk. That's all my stuff. Francis Livingston, TC Cannon stuff there that you get to see. And then I'll just zip through here. So we'll walk this way. That's all Maynard Dixon right there. There's Larry Kanzler right there, who came to visit.
What's that?
You're on Zoom.
Hey, Zoom.
Larry wrote a very famous song, actually.
The In and Out Burger song.
He did. He's actually got a gold record, interestingly enough. Wildfire, for all of those who know it. He wrote that with Michael Murphy. I think he came in to see the show. So I'm going to do it like this. And we'll start right here with the saguaros. Hopefully everybody can see what we're doing here.
I appreciated your staff telling me that's how you pronounce. Being not from Arizona, I'd say saguaro, but they say if you live there, that's how you pronounce it, as saguaro.
Yep, saguaro. That's that one I love so much. And you'll see most of these have little red dots on them. This is our kind of our Zion area right here. These are all three of these are just amazing paintings, quite frankly, with the big one in the middle. Now I'm just going
to. But you hung them how
I did.
When I painted that, I kind of pictured them as a group together, and so thanks for doing that.
Yes, we wanted to. Sorry, I'm not the best, but I wanted you to be able to see your signage up there as well. Yeah, they look fantastic together. They really do.
Well, that's one of the things I think with, when you do I mentioned in the podcast, when you do a show, you don't think in terms, I think, about individual painting as much. You're thinking about a body of work. They kind of, you think about how all the paintings work together. Of course, they do get broken up and they end up in different homes, but, at least for me, this is just, it is one body of work, one group of paintings.
Well, and I always get a big kick out of when I open a show like this, and I know they're all going to go different places all over the country, maybe even all over the world, that, historically, at some point, these could all be very important paintings. And someone's going to do research in the future and go, oh my God, look at all those Meikle paintings. They were all together at one time. And look at the prices. They're so, oh my gosh, you could have gotten one for $7,000. And, it is kind of interesting to see it from that historical component when you do this as an art dealer. At least I try to do that. So that's the show. And that's what your show looks like, David.
Yeah, I really like how you hung it. And one thing I mentioned, I think you do get, I did get ideas for different paintings by working on those. And that's why I think we ended up with 3 or 4 tree paintings. Normally I don't paint trees, but I started doing one and I got the idea to do another one. And that's the fun thing about doing a show like I did for you, Mark, is that you just sort of build up some momentum and you feel like you're kind of, you're working for something, and it's a lot of fun. This is why you get into art.
Well, you've done a fantastic job. I really appreciate it for your first one-man show with me. Again, we'll hopefully have one about a year from now where we won't be in pandemic mode and you can actually show up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children. Well, they're all growing. It's funny watching your daughter. Is your daughter right there still?
Oh, she ran outside.
Last time I saw her, she's a little kid with glasses, and now she's an adult almost. It's amazing how fast they grow. So, and I appreciate everybody who came to this. This is our first show that we've done like this, and I think it was quite successful. I really enjoyed it, and I hope other people did too. And if you did like it, let me know. Because this is something that we're trying to figure out. I have a bunch more shows coming up this year, and hopefully it was successful for you and you enjoyed it. And David, I hope you had a good time as well.
I had a very good time, and thank you everybody for spending time here.
All right, very good. Your paintings are here. I see a few people on the thing that have paintings that will be going to your homes, and congratulations. You're very fortunate to have gotten a David Meikle painting.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see you later. Thanks.
Okay, we'll see ya.
All right, bye-bye, guys. Bye, everybody.
We need your support for the Medicine Man Gallery channel, so make sure to click the subscribe button and tap the little bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, which we do every morning on Wednesday and Friday. See you soon.